He sold everything to save the farm. Nobody noticed until the day he made it. The morning Earl Hutchins walked into the First Farmers Bank of Clover County, he was wearing the same flannel shirt he'd worn to his wife's funeral 3 years before. He didn't own a tie anymore. He'd sold it at a garage sale for 50 cents, along with almost everything else that wasn't nailed to the ground or rooted in the earth. Pause. The woman at the front desk smiled, the way bank employees smile when they've already made a decision about you before you even sit down. Earl noticed. He always noticed things like that. He just never said anything about them. He placed a folder on the counter, worn at the corners. The papers inside creased from being folded and unfolded too many times in too many sleepless nights. "I need 60 more days," he said. She looked at the folder. Then she looked at him, at the calluses, the weathered jaw, the quiet in his eyes that some people mistake for stupidity, and others, if they're paying close enough attention, recognize as something else entirely. "Mr. Hutchins," she said slowly, "we've been through this." He nodded. "I know," he said. "I'm asking anyway." Long pause. Let it breathe. Title card. He sold everything to save the farm. Nobody noticed until the day he made it. Now, before I tell you what happened next, let me tell you who Earl Hutchins actually was. Because if you're going to understand this story, truly understand it, you need to understand the man. Earl was 61 years old. He'd been farming the same 340 acres in Clover County his entire life. His grandfather broke that ground in 1947. His father poured 30 years of sweat into it after that, and Earl inherited the whole thing at 32 when his father's heart gave out in the South Field on a Tuesday afternoon in August, which is, if you've ever farmed, one of the cruelest times of year to lose someone. Pause. The farm had seen good years, great years even, but the last 4 had been something different. First came a drought that cracked the earth like old pottery, then a market collapse on corn that gutted every small operation in the county, then a wet spring that rotted half his winter wheat before he could get it out of the ground, and finally, the thing that broke what was left of his cushion, a hailstorm in June, took out his equipment shed and everything inside it. Insurance covered some of it, not enough. The bank took notice. Beat. They always do. By the time fall rolled around, Earl had done the math so many times he could recite the numbers in his sleep, and some nights he did. The farm owed $214,000 on the remaining mortgage. He was 4 months behind on payments. His operating loan was maxed, and his savings, the modest, carefully kept emergency fund his wife Carol had insisted on for 30 years, was prawn, spent in 6 weeks trying to stay afloat after the hail. Pause. So Earl started selling, not with fanfare, not with a yard sale out on the highway or a public auction that would have drawn the county out to watch a man's life get picked apart by strangers. He did it quietly, the way he did everything. The truck went first, a '98 Chevy Silverado, 280,000 miles, cracked dashboard held together with electrical tape. He got $1,400 for it, paid it straight toward the interest that had been eating him alive. Then the ATV he used to check fence lines. Then his grandfather's woodworking tools, hand-forged, wrapped in oilcloth, kept in a cedar chest in the barn since before Earl was born. A collector drove 3 hours for those. Earl took $750 without negotiating, because the man seemed decent, and Earl didn't have the energy. Pause. Then came the guns. His grandfather's rifle, a 1952 Winchester Model 70 that hung above the fireplace his entire life. He carried it in the original leather case, brown, brass clasps, initials burned in the corner. R.H. Raymond Hutchins, dead 40 years, still present somehow in that worn leather. Earl set it on the passenger seat and drove to town without the radio on. Pause.
He got $1,100 for it, and he didn't tell a single soul, not his son Travis out in Phoenix, busy with his own life 1,000 miles away, not his daughter Lena, raising 3 kids in Billings with enough worry of her own, not his neighbor Jim Purcell, who would have offered to help and whose help Earl would have refused, because there's a particular dignity in certain men that makes accepting charity feel like surrendering something they can never get back. So he just kept going, quiet, steady, like a man who's decided where he's headed and doesn't see the point in making a scene about it. Now, let me pause here for a moment, because while Earl was selling everything, he was doing something else at the same time, something nobody saw. He was thinking, not panicking, not making desperate decisions or signing bad deals. Every morning at 5 a.m., long before light, he sat at his kitchen table with a cup of black coffee and a yellow legal pad, and he was thinking about the land. Not the debt on the land itself. Specifically, the South Field, a 30-acre parcel that had underperformed for 6 straight years. The ground there had always been different. His father knew it. His grandfather worked around it. That March, Earl sent soil samples to the extension office. The results came back with a notation he read 3 times. He folded the paper up, put it in his shirt pocket, and let himself believe what it meant. The South Field wasn't failing because it was bad land. It was failing because everyone had been treating it like the wrong kind of land. Pause. That spring, Earl went to a county extension meeting. Plastic folding chairs, bad coffee, tired people. An agronomist from the state university was presenting on soil health and alternative crops. Earl raised his hand. "How about Haskap berries?" he said. The room didn't exactly laugh, but there was a particular kind of silence that communicates the same thing. A man 2 rows up, Dale Pritchard, who ran the biggest operation in the county and made sure everyone knew it, turned around slowly. "Haskap berries," Dale repeated. Not a question, just the words placed back in the air like something he was handing back because he didn't want it. "Haskap," Earl said again. "Hardy to zone 3, matures early. The soil profile in my South Field matches exactly what they need, and there's a market developed." "Earl," the extension agent cut in gently, the way you speak to someone you don't want to embarrass in public, "Haskap berries are a specialty crop. The infrastructure investment alone—" "I know what the investment is," Earl said. "You're also not exactly in a position." "I know what position I'm in, too." Beat. The room went quiet. Dale Pritchard made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh, but was close enough. Earl sat back in his chair and didn't say another word for the rest of the meeting. Pause. Here's what Earl knew that nobody in that room bothered to find out. Haskap berries, also called honeyberries, are one of the hardiest fruit crops in the world. Originally developed in Russia and Japan, they grow in brutal northern climates. They come alive in early spring before almost anything else will even germinate, and they produce heavily. The nutritional profile is exceptional, high in antioxidants, vitamin C, iron, and the specialty food market in North America had been quietly building demand for a decade. Health food distributors, specialty grocers, juice producers. The market was there. And Earl's South Field? The pH was right, the drainage pattern was right, the elevation gave it just enough protection from the late spring flooding that hit his low ground every other year. He'd spent 6 months reading everything he could find. He'd called a grower up in Saskatchewan, a 5-hour conversation stretched over 2 weeks. He drove 4 hours to visit a small operation in Idaho, sat in that man's kitchen for 2 hours asking questions, then drove home alone in the dark. He had a plan. What he didn't have was money, or anyone who believed he should use it this way. The bank gave him 60 days, not because they believed in him, but because foreclosure paperwork has a processing timeline, and 60 days was simply what the process required. Earl drove home in his neighbor Dina's borrowed truck, parked it in her driveway,
left the keys under the mat, and walked the half-mile back to his own place. Pause. He planted that spring on a budget assembled from what was left after the selling. He negotiated with a berry nursery in Alberta, a 5-hour conversation stretched over 2 weeks, and got starter stock on a deferred payment arrangement, trading labor consulting in exchange for reduced cost. He did all his own ground preparation, borrowed equipment from Dina, from the Falk boys down the road, from a man named George Tibbs, who'd farmed the adjacent parcel for 30 years and owed Earl nothing, but showed up anyway at 6 in the morning with a tractor and a thermos of coffee. Beat. Nobody from the county took notice. Why would they? A broke farmer with a string of bad luck, planting berries on his worst field. That's not a